Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. He was born in Ontario, lived in a small 2-bedroom bungalow, 3 boys in one small bedroom with a coal-burning furnace, no air conditioning. His father made beer and his mother was a family seamstress who left her job to take care of the family. Born prematurely, weighing 4 pounds, spending his first 6 months in the hospital. He had dyslexia, causing him to rearrange words and numbers in his mind, which is something I also have. I didn't realize. And he didn't realize it until about 35 years ago. Back in those days, there's no such thing as dyslexia, ADD, or ADHD. Labeled a slow learner, getting a C was a great grade for him. He grew up with a milkman, bread man, egg man, potato man that made their deliveries in horse-drawn trucks. Started working at 9 years old. And by the time he was 12, he had a part-time job. 2 days after his mother's death, after his 14th birthday, he decided to change the trajectory of his life to go for it. That decision began his 54-year journey that continues today, becoming an A student, corporate executive, traveling the world, accomplishing more than he thought he ever could with wealth and success. But he had made a promise in 1968, and he didn't forget that. He left corporate America to lead in a better direction, turning down vice presidential roles, and began to create the Master of Business Leadership program. Having been an executive coach for 21 years, I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast from Canada, Phil Johnson. Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G.
Oh, Lisa, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. I think the world needs more of what you do. So jumping into the content right now, is there something that we can do to guarantee our personal and career success?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And the answer is yes. The one thing we can do that will guarantee both business and personal success is the development of our emotional intelligence. And I've been proving that working with executives and organizations all over the world for the last 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's the development of our emotional intelligence is an essential part of our development that's missing. Our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us because they focused primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor, and they've done little or nothing to develop our emotional intelligence.
Right.
And we're facing a tsunami of change. Change is increasing at an exponential rate. Some scientists estimate that we could experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change in the century. And the development of our emotional intelligence is essential for us to be able to handle the drama, chaos, and conflict that's going to create in us. You see, we have a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change.
Right. Change is difficult for everybody.
Very.
Yet we've had to endure so much change in the last 2 years alone.
Agreed, but it's really the rate of change is going to accelerate dramatically beyond the changes we've seen so far. It's quite frankly, it's going to make the last 2 years look like nothing.
Wow. Well, I love that you're so far ahead of everybody else getting started with emotional intelligence, which is such a buzzword now, but it wasn't 20 years ago. So how can we get started with emotional intelligence?
That's another great question. The emotional intelligence is an experiential process, meaning that you can't develop it by having a conversation or reading a book or watching a video. So the way to begin for everybody is to develop a strong emotional connection with a desired result that
Right,
motivates us to leave our comfort zone. You see, whenever we take an action that moves us outside of our comfort zone, that always creates stress and anxiety in us. So we
right,
need to develop an emotional connection to a desired result that's stronger than the fear that's going to get generated when we leave our comfort zone.
right. Because change is scary and then the resistance comes along, right?
Yep. There's both biological, there's three major sources of resistance to change. Two are biological and one is sociological. But yeah, it's think of the development of our emotional intelligence as Navy SEAL training for our emotions.
Right.
It's extremely difficult, but the results are remarkable. Can I give you a numeric example of the difference between IQ and EQ?
Yeah, I would love to explain a little bit more to our audience the differentiation between EQ and IQ and why we need it now with all this change going on.
Yep. Um, think of IQ as getting $10,000 a day for 31 days.
Right.
So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. And think of emotional intelligence as getting a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. Um, at the end of 31 days, day one, you've got a penny, day two, you've got two pennies, day 31, you've got $10.7 million. And actually, to continue it, day 40, you've got over 5 billion, day 50, you've got over $5 trillion.
So it's
Um,
compounding in interest.
yeah, exponentially. Um, see, the development of our intellectual intelligence is fixed. It's genetic. If not everybody has 160 IQ, if you have
Right.
a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you inherited those genes.
Yeah.
But the development of emotional intelligence is something that anybody can do. Um, and the ROI is far greater than intellectual intelligence. It multiplies the effectiveness dramatically of our intellectual intelligence. Think of IQ as think of an iceberg. IQ is the part of the iceberg sticking above the water. EQ is the part of the iceberg under the water.
Much
So,
bigger.
so let me give you an example of a company that's doing over $1 trillion a year in revenue,
Right.
whose primary focus in hiring is emotional intelligence. That company is Apple.
Wow.
So that's why when you go into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're far less interested in what you know about their products and services. They can teach you that, but they're really looking for people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. See, they're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, help you with that pain. They want you to have a great experience. So maybe you'll tell your friends and they'll tell their friends. So when you go into an Apple store, feel the energy, look at the faces of the people in the store, both working there and customers, and then compare that energy to the energy of the stores surrounding it. It's very different. So more
Right.
and more companies like Apple, Google, Southwest Airlines, JetBlue, Infosys, Whole Foods, FedEx, Costco, and others are hiring, promoting, and developing largely based on emotional intelligence.
Well, that's why it's important, but can you give like a concrete example of what emotional intelligence is? Is it something like responding rather than reacting to a stressor?
Yeah, it is. The development of your emotional intelligence now it allows you to become less resistive, less judgmental, and less attached to outcome. it allows you to lower your walls and be more in the present moment. Um, and it also enables you to not only reconnect with who you really are, but it also helps you to understand people for who they really are. As a matter of fact, you're actually able to understand them better than they're able to understand themselves, because when we raise our walls, we become blind. We become blind to who we are, and we become blind to who other people are. Let me just
Right.
explain a little bit. So, part of our old lizard brain, there's a part called the amygdala that's been trying to keep us alive for the last 500 million years by making sure we never leave the safety of our cave. And if we do, it secretes a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol.
Right.
And that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off. And we go into what psychologists often refer to as we have an amygdala hijack. We go into fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Right.
We often say and do things we later regret. But when that happens in conflict situations, people often die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn
Right.
trust. So if you think, as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big sister or a big brother to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the anxiety that change and innovation creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to keep us stuck in our comfort zones. So
Well,
that's just one of three major sources of resistance we have to change.
yeah, change is definitely scary. I know for me, it wasn't until I had enough pain over 10 years ago that I started studying self-mastery with my coach and learning this stuff and realizing that I felt like the definition of insanity of just repeating the same behavior, expecting a different results. And then when I came to the conclusion that the common denominator in all of these failed relationships I was experiencing was me, and then I could own everything, then I became less reactive and more responsive. But that was a lot of pain that it took me to get to that place to change.
I want to let me help you out just a little bit, Lisa. Um, in understanding, connecting the dots. What I've been the central thesis of the work I've been doing over the last 21 years is proving that there's an underlying energy physics to all of this that makes the results as predictable and quantifiable as any physical science. Simply what that means is that I show people how they're giving away their energy, and I give them better habits of practice to stop doing that. And as they learn to stop giving away their energy, that's how they develop their emotional intelligence. They raise their level of consciousness, and they become more inspirational leaders all at the same time.
Well, that's touching on so much great stuff. Do you have any final ways for our audience to actually, the practical ways to be unstoppable with emotional intelligence?
Sure. Let me give you just one example from the MBL program of giving away our energy and how to stop doing that. It's called authentic listening. The key to authentic listening is not to take anything personally. How somebody feels about you, whether they like you or whether they don't, has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what's going on inside of them. But if how we feel about ourselves is based on how somebody else feels about us, who's in control of our life? You or them?
They are.
Right. So we're unconsciously giving away our energy to other people to determine whether we should like ourselves or not. If you like me, I like me. If you don't like me, I don't like me. So, and we do that in social media all the time. We're dying for people to like us so we can like ourselves. So
That's sad.
that's just one way, one of many ways we're giving away our energy. And you see, when we give away our energy, it creates an energy deficit in us. So at the same time we're giving away our energy unconsciously, we have to replace that energy by trying to steal the energy from other people to replace the energy we're giving away. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all the time.
The vampires, there's energy vampires.
Correct. So what I do in the MBL program is I show people how they're giving away their energy, and I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And it's in that process that you develop your emotional intelligence, raise your level of consciousness, and become a more inspirational leader.
Well, I love the part about listening. I know that has been a journey for me to get better at listening.
Yeah, we hear, but we don't listen. When we raise our walls, when we raise our walls, it all becomes about us. So we're not really paying attention to the other person. We're not really trying to connect with the other person because we're quite frankly in survival mode. We're in the midst of an amygdala hijack.
I love that term. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know I met you on LinkedIn. Where can people find more of your emotional intelligence and MBL and all of that stuff?
On LinkedIn, I've got a newsletter and I publish several times a week. But my calendar is also on there. If somebody would like to, they could just go in and set up a meeting, and we can meet via Zoom and have a chat.
Well, Phil Johnson, you are like a wealth of knowledge on how we can not only survive but thrive in these uncertain times. So thank you for being a wonderful guest on WholeCEO with Lisa G.
Thanks, Lisa. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to WholeCEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.